Lokabandhu, and Gupchand's going, is this a way? And Lokabandhu said, well, he usually holds all the qualities before him with loving kindness and looks at all of them. And I said, well, no, I'm just going to kick out this. I feel, like Santideva, I just feel like this is not going to suit me anymore, and I need to get on with things. So at that time, I was beginning a journey, because I was leaving the only home that I had, a suite in a hotel that my sister and I own, and I could no longer live there. So I was getting rid of most of my things, and I knew I'd just have a permanent place for a couple of months, a year. So I was getting rid of things and packing things up, and there was a lot of dust, and I was getting these bites. It was early spring. I was getting these bites on my body, and I thought, well, it's fleas, because there's so much dust and they always breed in the dust. So I did the packing, all that, and then I got down to the coast of Turkey on my way to Greece, and I stayed at my sister's place and our meditation center also. And I still was getting bites, and I thought, well, it's my sister's cat. I blame a lot of things on my sister, and I thought it was that. So then I took the ferry boat to Athens. And when I got to Athens, there were still bites coming, and that was strange, because my house is completely clean in Athens, and there was no reason to get them. And a friend of mine said, oh, you've got lice, because lice, which are bit, you've got lice, what they do is they live in the seams of your clothes, and then when you put your clothes on, they come out and bite you. And that just like, oh, I've got lice. And so I started washing all my clothes, and I got medicine for my hair and medicine for my body. And it was Easter time in Greece, and my doctors that I depend on, my homeopath and my skin doctor, were on holidays, long holidays, because Easter is the biggest holiday in Greece. And I went to a very out of it, ridiculous doctor who made no sense at all. And I thought, no, I'm just going to wait for my people. And during that time, I was cleaning and washing and doing all of this. And I thought that I was practicing. I was quite aware that I was practicing forbearance to all those itches and bites. I was practicing forbearance. And I was also practicing skillful energy, because I was washing and cleaning and doing things, and nothing was holding me down. I was just doing it daily. And I remember my sister Anne saying, you're just amazing, all your energy. And I thought, yeah, I know, theory. But there is something in Buddhism that they call the enemy of the practice. And the enemy of the practice is something that looks like the practice, but isn't. And so you feel like you're doing it, but you're actually not doing it. And in forbearance, now this I realized quite a lot later, I was actually doing my Christian martyr. I'm a Catholic. I was brought up a Catholic. I was doing my Christian martyr thing of having all this difficulty, of having these bugs in my clothes, and just going on despite the problems, like Job in the Bible. And I was a victim. My victim mentality came out. It was like I was having all the problems, and nobody else was. Everybody else was fine. They went to meditation retreats, and I didn't know if I'd even be able to go to my meditation retreats in England, because I was covered in bugs, and I'd give them to everybody. And underneath all of that was also another little thing, and that was that I was going to be rewarded for this, because in the Christian ways of thinking and the way I was brought up, I would be rewarded for suffering. And that basically I was figuring I was really going to get ahead on my path of awakening because of all the suffering I was doing. But that wasn't forbearance. And actually, my self-confidence, rather than going away, started to come back. I mean, my low self-confidence started coming back even more. And virya, what I thought was energetic, skillful acts, was actually a fight. I had created a war with these beings, these lice in my clothes, and I was fighting them at all costs, and I was going to get rid of them. And some of my friends sort of suggested to me that maybe I didn't have lice, because I kept washing the clothes and they kept coming back, and it turned out, actually, I wouldn't listen to them. But it turned out that I had a skin allergy from taking too much vitamin B and not enough vitamin D. And this had created something, but I didn't find this out for a long time because I was busy fighting my illusion, fighting nothing. But this was my virya, this was my skillful effort and my strength. What it also did was it kind of separated me from the world, and I started to go into myself and feel like the world was against me, and that I had to be in defense, and that everything was going to go wrong for me. And I found out that that it wasn't lice just a few days before I went on to England. But I took that kind of fearful expectation with me, and that kind of feeling bad about myself along with me on my journey. And it was there that I found another layer of meaning in this practice of following Santideva, really. And that was in my relationship with a bodhisattva. So now we're going to go to the second part of the talk, which is on bodhisattvas. Could you tell me how we're doing? Is it halfway through or more?
There's about 18 minutes
Left, okay. So let me look now what I'm going to talk about to do with bodhisattvas. Okay, so I'd like to start with another quote from the verses of the Bodhicaryavatara, and it's a question that Santideva asks. Such a being, unprecedented, an excellent jewel, in whom there is born a concern for the welfare of others, such as others have not even for themselves. How is he born? And so that question is something really to kind of live and wonder, how is it that a person could care for others more even than themselves, or a being, because he's actually talking about these amazing beings that are the bodhisattvas. The Tibetans call bodhisattva an enlightened mind hero. And I think that's really true, because there's so much heroic in this step of these beings to offer their lives, to continue the attempt of helping all beings until everyone has reached enlightenment. And these bodhisattvas, traditionally, not all of them, but they're figures, they're archetypal, mysterious, mythical figures in Buddhism. Mahayana, but all of Buddhism has them. And there are many colors, and they have many different faces. Some of them are red women, bikinis that are flying in the air. Some of them are like a handsome young man, Vajrapani, who turns into a blue, furious man or demon who smacks you for not understanding with a sword, for not understanding the truth of reality. So I'd like to speak about just a few of these, two of these magnificent figures. There's first, before talking about these grades, I think it's important to say that there's a spectrum of bodhisattvas. It's something that we can do as human beings. We can practice the paramitas as human beings on the path and say, we'd like to be able to reach this, or we'd like to be able to care for others as much as we care for ourselves. And then the spectrum goes on different levels to the incredible ancient figures that are even older than the Bodhicaryavatara itself, figures that are archetypal and mythical, that carry with them some kinds of magic, archetypal meanings, that if we want to let that happen, it can come into our practice and sometimes make the practice easier or make our own feeling of ourselves bigger. So now I think I'll talk about the Bodhisattva that Santideva himself loved the most, and that is Manjushri. Manjushri's there, good. And he's a very beautiful young man carrying a sword. All bodhisattvas, or not all, but most of them were 16. This age of just coming into adulthood, full of the ideals of life without having compromised anything in a long life. They're 16 and full of energy. They also wear beautiful silks and often jewels and headdresses, something like the caravan leaders, something like these images of something exotic. The caravan leaders who travel to the very end, but they don't stay, they come back to help other people on the journey. And that's what the Bodhisattvas do. So Manjushri means gentle wisdom, and he's the Bodhisattva of wisdom, and he rides on a blue lion, or he sits on a blue lion skin, which is also a very archetypal image. In medieval tarot, in the tarot deck, the strength card of the major arcana is a young and beautiful woman holding the jaws of a lion open, and that also is archetypal. She's taming the body, and Manjushri, by riding the lion, is taming the mind. So it's an archetype of taming something very, very strong. And Santideva said that he wrote the book with the words of Manjushri. They weren't his words. He actually just listened to Manjushri and wrote the whole book from what Manjushri told him. And so that's an example of the way bodhisattvas can work in the life and practice of people. They can work like something to channel, like a muse for art, something that lets us into a bigger space and lets us freer with our knowledge and creativity. And that's how Manjushri worked for Santideva. So now I'd like to talk about another bodhisattva who is my favorite bodhisattva, and she is Green Tara, and she's right here, and she's green too. She's a very special, amazing figure who embodies a lot of the ancient goddesses, really, from the East. And she was born out of the tears of one of the most amazing and compassionate, the most incredible bodhisattva, Avalokiteshvara, who's where? Oh, up there. Yeah, there he is with his 1,000 arms helping everyone. And I would have liked to speak about him too, but I feel that I haven't time. So I'll just have to say that he is the bodhisattva of compassion, and his name means the one who looks on suffering or hears the lamentations and sufferings of the world. And he was crying tears at the suffering that he saw in the world, and the tears kept flowing and created a pond. And in the pond, these blue lotuses grew, and one blue lotus opened, and inside was Green Tara sitting there. And she's a savioress. She's there to help all beings in trouble. And she's greatly loved in the Buddhist world, and she's asked by many, many people for her help. She sits in the lotus position. She sits on her blue lotus, but one of her legs is coming out into the world, and so she's always ready to come out and help others. So my relationship with her kind of led me into another key of this getting rid of my low self-esteem. I went to a retreat shortly, within a few days of all of that happening in Greece, I ended up in a retreat in England. And I started thinking that I was getting judged by everybody, and I started worrying about what I did, and I was thinking I was making mistakes all the time. And I brought this up to my study leader, spoke to people about it. It was just very visible and very annoying to me, and certainly not what had been on my plans. And I mentioned to Padmashuri, my study leader, that I particularly loved the green Tara, and that I always asked for her help, because that's what I've always done. I first learned about her in 2017, and I realized, oh, she's this wonderful being in the forest on this pond of blue lotuses, and I can ask for her help whenever I need it, and I've always done that. And Padmashuri said, well, you know, you don't need only to ask for help. You need, what we do when we work with Bodhisattvas is we take their characteristics inside ourselves and we work with them inside ourselves. We take on their characteristics. And she said, you really need to take on your power. And I really disliked hearing that. I couldn't sleep that night. It was like, what? I'm supposed to take on my power. What is power? And, you know, I'm supposed to go back to being egotistical and competitive. What is this power? How do I find this power? And I went down to the breakfast room in the middle of the night and ate Marmite on crackers, thinking, what is power? And I kind of kept that with me for some months, because I wasn't really quite sure, but I kept that question with me, what is taking my power? And it wasn't until the end of this journey, in autumn, where I was back in Turkey, and I was at our meditation center on the coast, and I was between meditations and I was there alone. And I kind of started seeing something about myself. And our lovely gardener, Eshref, of the meditation center, he brought me some grapes, brought me these fresh grapes, and I said, oh, thank you, and I gave him the old grapes that I had. And he gave me fresh grapes, and I thought, that's really naive, that's so shameful. He brought me fresh grapes, and I gave him the old grapes, and now he thinks I'm really horrible and shameful, and I've got to show him that I'm not greedy, which I really am greedy, but, you know, I've got to show him that I'm not. And then I sort of started thinking about it, and thinking about the fact that, well, you know, Eshref has all those grapevines in the garden, and he brought me those grapes, and he doesn't even care about eating. So I'm just making all of this up. And I realized actually that I was making up almost everything that I did, because I was acting on what I thought other people were thinking about me. And I was creating like a house of cards, like, oh, I have to show Eshref that I'm generous, or I have to show all of you that I'm wise and that I'm really, I've got it down. I have to do these things because people expect it of me. And I wasn't thinking about what I wanted. And I realized that it was really quite a delusion, because I had decided what people thought. It wasn't what they thought. So it was kind of a freedom for me. And it's been with me now since then. And I've